And as always, I really appreciate everyone taking the time out of your day to join me here for this presentation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan. I'm the Customer Learning and Development Consultant here at RightCapital, and I'm really excited to be here with you today for this presentation of presenting a financial plan to a retiree in RightCapital. For those of you who might be newer to RightCapital, this is one of our recurring training webinars. Each and every week, we run these sessions here at RightCapital to help you get up and running within the system. In today's webinar, we're going to take a look at tips, strategies, and best practices when it comes to using RightCapital in your client presentations. So I like to say that here at RightCapital, we want to be the visual backdrop for those planning conversations. So whether you're preparing to present to a client in person or whether you're putting together a PDF report for a client, there's really a lot that we can do in RightCapital to hammer home the value of your recommendations to clients and to help facilitate some of those important talking points. In particular today, we're going to be taking a look at a case study for a retiree client. So for those of you who work with retirees on a regular basis, you'll get some additional exposure today to a handful of the planning modules and a handful of the strategies that are maybe a little more specific to that demographic. Things like maybe the Social Security and Medicare modules for folks who might have retired a little bit early, the tax module for folks who want to make sure that they're being as tax efficient as possible as they start to draw down on their assets, and even things like the long-term care insurance analysis and the estate module, the estate analysis for clients who might be starting to think about those things. Let's just take a quick look over our agenda here before we dive in for today. As I mentioned, we're going to focus on tips and tricks for utilizing RightCapital in those presentations. So we're going to touch on a couple of the different planning modules and presentation methods that have proven to be popular and effective for many advisors on the platform. Of course, there's no right or wrong way to use RightCapital in your presentations. So we're also going to talk through some of the ways that you can streamline and tailor your presentation process to your individual preferences. Maybe you do prefer to present to clients using a static deliverable like a PDF report, or maybe you prefer to present in software, whether that's in person or over screen share using something like Zoom. So every advisor has their own style and their own approach. And another goal of our presentation today is to help you to find and then fine-tune your unique presentation flow, and ultimately to help you build confidence navigating RightCapital in your presentations. As always, we're going to touch on some key advisory resources that you have at your disposal that will certainly be helpful for you as you prepare for those presentations. And for those of you that might be newer to RightCapital, I want to remind everyone that these webinars are always fully interactive. And at the end of the day, I want to hear from you. So if you have any questions at all as we're making our way through the presentation today, please feel free to write in. You should find a Q&A field in the Zoom control panel on your screen. I've got about 45 to 50 minutes of prepared content for you here today, and then I'll be sticking around to answer your questions. So like I said, please don't hesitate to write in. I'll be here to help however I can. All right, that being said, let's dive into the presentation here. We're going to start things off in the advisor portal today. There are a couple of important pages in the advisor area that you will want to be aware of before you start presenting in RightCapital and before you start generating reports. So especially for those of you that might be joining us for the first time here today, I want to make sure to touch on the account settings here in the advisor area. So after logging in, you can always click into the gear icon in the upper right, and then again into the Accounts tab to find the account settings. If you're a long-time RightCapital user, this might be more of a review for you, so we won't spend too much time here today, but especially for anyone who may have just signed up for RightCapital, you will definitely want to review these areas before you start presenting and generating reports. So first things first, starting with the Profile tab here, this is where, after creating your account and logging in for the first time, you'll want to make sure to enter some of your information, things like your name and certifications, your firm name, phone number and address, and even, you'll notice, if it's required, an additional report disclosure can be added here as well. And all of this information that's entered on this page, the firm information and the disclosure, will be included in any reports that you generate. So it is definitely a good practice, before we start generating those reports, to quickly pop into the gear icon, account, profile tab, and just make sure that everything here is filled out properly. I do also want to take a quick second just to touch on customization. This is more of an optional step, but for those of you who might want to essentially white label the software and maybe tailor the look and feel of your presentations to better reflect your firm's branding, that's something you're able to do here within the customization area. You're able to replace the RightCapital logo with your own logo. So, you can see here that I uploaded a festive winter version of the RightCapital logo for my custom logo here that will replace the RightCapital logo in the upper left, and it'll also replace our logo on the cover page of those reports. So like I said, an optional step, but if you do want to use your logo in the software and in those presentations, you can always upload that here. There's also a couple of additional options here. You can mix and match the colors if you'd like to maybe set it to a primary and secondary color that match your firm's branding a little bit more closely than the default white and gray. So you've got lots of flexibility here on this page. Like I said, we won't be spending too much time here today, but I do want to mention for those of you that might be looking for more details on this area, you can always take a look at our Help Center if you click the chat bubble in the lower right and then click the Search Our Help Center button. We have an article here dedicated to that account settings page. And within this article, you'll find an overview of all of that profile information, where that populates on the cover page of your reports if you're curious, and ultimately how you can upload your logo, how you can customize your color scheme, and more. So definitely don't hesitate to take a look at the account settings article in our Help Center for more details on this. All right. So with that out of the way, the next thing we're going to do here today is dive into our case study. So we're going to be looking at a joint plan today for Jane and Michael. And I always like to start these presentations off by navigating to the Profile Blueprint tab. So within the Profile Blueprint area, what we have here is essentially a consolidated summary of all of the profile inputs, everything that was entered during that initial data entry process. And here we can see a great high-level overview of the client's current situation, their current assets and liabilities, all of their financial goals as we project those out into the future, and of course, all their income, savings, and expenses as well. So this is a great place to start because a lot of advisors also like to start here in their presentations, just because it is that high-level view of the plan in its current state as of today. So let's take a quick look here through the three different areas and get a little more familiar with this particular case study. Here we have in the net worth tab, we can see that Jane and Michael are both in their mid to late 60s. We can see that their net worth is currently sitting at almost $3 million in total. We can also see there's a child entered in this plan, Tom. And in addition to that, we also have all of their assets and liabilities broken out by owner here. So we can see everything owned by Jane on the left, Michael on the right, and everything jointly held in the center. So this is probably the best place to really see all of a client's assets and liabilities at a high level, all on one page. On the flip side, if we were taking a look at the client's net worth, where most of this information is entered up front, you do have to sort of click into the different categories here to view all the different accounts and loans and so on. So the blueprint really makes it easy to see everything all in one place. Similarly, the goals area is going to lay out all of the client's financial goals from now through the remainder of their plan. So we can see in this case, Jane is already retired. Jane retired back in 2022. We can see that Michael's planning to retire this year in 2025. In terms of additional goals, if we continue to scroll here, we can see they plan to do a little bit of traveling in the years after they both retire. We can see that there's a primary home relocation goal here where they plan to move into an existing property that they own down in Florida. And then we see some charitable giving occurring for quite a while through the remainder of the plan as well. So this is a great way to see all those goals in the long term. Last but not least, we have our income, savings, and expenses. And this is going to summarize all that information entered into those three areas of the profile. So we get a high-level look at the different income streams, pensions, salaries, if the clients are still working, Social Security benefits and what those might be looking like. And if those clients are still contributing to any of their investments, we can take a look at that as well. So, as we can see here, The blueprint, really a great place to see every element of that client's current plan all in one place. And as I said, a lot of advisors do like to start here in their meetings and in their presentations, just to really, paint that picture for the clients and help them to better understand their current situation before we dive into, any what if scenarios or proposals. In terms of using this as a presentation tool, specifically within the RightCapital software, I do want to make sure to highlight a couple of additional nuances here. Firstly, you can also use the blueprints not only as an overview to review this information, but also as a way to, add additional information and make adjustments to any items as well. So, maybe we're looking through something like the client's net worth statement here, and we can see maybe one of these balances isn't quite right. Maybe something's a little overstated or understated. We can click into any of those accounts, make any adjustments that we need to make, and that's going to update the entire financial plan to reflect that change that we've made. So this can be a great way, especially if you're inviting clients to do some of their own data entry, to sort of spot check those inputs, make sure that everything we're using as the baseline information in the plan is as accurate as possible before we move on to something like the retirement analysis. I will mention you can also add additional items here. So, just as another quick example, maybe we're looking over the client's goals, for instance, and we notice that something's missing. We can always click the add button in the upper right, and we can add, any goals that we'd like to account for here. So maybe these clients, have a legacy goal that they want to make sure is being factored into their plan. They want to set aside a certain dollar amount for their children or grandchildren at the end of those projections. We can add that legacy goal right here to the blueprint tab, and we can make sure that that's, included it not only in the blueprint, but also in the entire financial plan. Last but not least, you do have a little bit of flexibility to edit the way that things appear here. So, you'll notice that if you click the edit button on any of these tabs, you can not only choose to include and exclude certain items from the charts. In something like the goals tab, you can also choose if you want those recurring goals, those long-term goals to recur every single year or just in the year that they start. So maybe charitable giving is a good example of that. We have that starting in 2030 and then occurring every year for the rest of the plan. Maybe we don't want to see, charitable giving every single year like this. We can always click the edit button for the charitable giving goal. We can swap that over to display for first year only. Then if we click save, you'll notice that, that only shows up in the year that it starts. And then if we click into it, we can see that that's, going to last for the remainder of the plan. So we can clean up the visuals a little bit by using that edit feature. So to summarize here with the blueprint, you have a lot of flexibility to make changes, add new items, and edit the visuals here on the fly. And it sort of saves you the step of having to click around between the different areas of the profile to edit information and add new items. Great. So the next page that we're going to look at here today is the retirement analysis. And a lot of advisors, for a lot of advisors, this is the next place that they'll navigate to immediately following the blueprint page. And the reason for that is the retirement analysis is really going to be your home base whenever you're modeling what if scenarios, addressing specific client questions and making specific recommendations as part of a client's proposed plan. So, naturally, for many advisors, this page has also become somewhat of a staple for client meetings and for client presentations as well. The action items on this page really are, the heart and soul of this tool. These are designed to be dynamic so that, you can quickly make changes in the moment as your clients ask questions and as the nature of that conversation twists and turns. You can make adjustments to the parameters in the proposal and immediately see the impact on the client's proposed plan. So let me go ahead and reset this here and we can start from scratch. All right. So, right now we have our current and proposed plans, identical. Everything's the same, but maybe we're looking at this with a client. They're relatively satisfied with, their probability of success, but they have a couple questions. Maybe Michael's wondering, what happens if I retire a couple years later? What happens if our spending is a little bit lower or maybe a little bit higher than we anticipated? We can make quick adjustments like that to the action items, click the refresh button in the lower right, and ultimately it'll rerun the numbers and show us what the impact of those changes would be at a high level in terms of overall probability of success and overall median ending portfolio value. So of course, that's a relatively simple example what I've just modeled here, but the retirement analysis is where we can also start to bring in some of those other modules that are a little bit more specific to this case study for our retiree clients. So, in the right-hand column here, we have a strategies tab. The idea here is that there are a lot of planning modules in RightCapital that allow you to curate specific strategies for more specific elements of a client's plan. And we can then import those strategies into the proposal and make sure that those are being factored into the client's overall financial plan and future-looking projections. So, a couple of the modules that we might be looking at here today for these clients, considering these clients did retire on the earlier side, maybe, if they haven't yet filed for Social Security, that's something that we can take a look at here. I've intentionally created a situation here where, Michael hasn't yet filed so that we can take a look at this tool. This module will not only allow you to directly compare and contrast different filing strategies against one another, whether that's as early as possible, full retirement age, delaying as long as possible. It'll also automatically calculate for these specific clients based on their cash flows when they should each file to maximize the benefits that they'll receive from Social Security. So in this case, Jane's already retired and she's already began her benefits. She started filing at age 65, but for Mike, it looks like maybe he could benefit from delaying to 70 compared to his current strategy of filing at 65 when he retires. And that's something that back in the retirement analysis module, we can actually implement very quickly within the plan. So back in that strategies column we just looked at, you'll notice that there is a Social Security strategy here. And we can simply select the optimal strategy and make sure that that's included in those future-looking plan projections. Another module that might be relevant for clients that are starting to draw down on their assets is the tax strategies module. Maybe they want to make sure that they're being as tax efficient as possible as they start to withdraw that money they've worked so hard for. So the tax strategies tool is another one that maybe you'll find yourself using with clients on the verge of retirement or in retirement. Some of the things that we can do here are model something like Roth conversions. We can say, what happens if we convert a certain amount of assets? What if we target a specific tax bracket threshold and make conversions up to that bracket in the years where maybe we have less taxable income? So we're able to model strategies like that. Ultimately, we can show clients the benefit in terms of their tax adjusted ending assets as a result of our strategy. We can show them, how much more in tax-free assets they'll have by the end of their plan projections. So we can see as a result of some Roth conversions I've modeled here, these clients are benefiting in terms of a jump from 30% to 72% tax-free assets at the end of their life. So, that's just a sample of what we can do here in the tax strategies tab for those retiree clients. And just like the Social Security module, we can then implement our tax strategies back here in the retirement tool by simply toggling on that tax proposal. The last strategy I want to take a quick look at here, specifically as it relates to expenses for these retired clients, is going to be the retirement spending strategy. So this one doesn't have a dedicated module, but this can still be a valuable strategy for those clients who maybe are looking to cut down on expenses in retirement in a number of different ways. So, inflation adjusted is the default setting here. We assume that, the client's expenses in retirement are going to increase by your general inflation rate out into the future each year, but we also include a number of spending strategies that you can implement as well to hopefully, improve your client's probability of success in retirement. So a chart that I actually like to use here when it comes to retirement spending strategies is this chart here in the retirement details tab. So this is a handy trick for you if you're planning to, maybe showcase in a presentation the impact that these strategies can have on their expenses. we can sort of isolate those retirement living expenses here within this chart. And then we can take a look at some of these different spending strategies. So maybe instead of, that simple inflation adjusted strategy, maybe we want to implement something like retirement spending stages where we have different adjustments happening at different times throughout the client's retirement years. We can see that a little bit more clearly here in this chart. We can see that first expense adjustment happening at age 65, then a second expense adjustment happening at 85, and then another one due to one of these clients passing away first. So this is a great visual just for showing clients, the mechanics of what's happening with some of these retirement spending strategies. And ultimately, clients frequently benefit from these strategies as well in terms of helping to reduce their expenses either at different times. The spending smile is one that's designed to help mitigate, Medicare, healthcare costs in retirement. And then we've got some other strategies that are a little bit more tied to things like the client's withdrawal rate, market performance, and so on. So you can utilize all of these with your clients. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we can mix and match these different strategies and show clients the overall benefit to their plan as a whole. So I know that was, a lot of information and not a lot of time there. I did want to make sure to touch on some of the key strategies and some of the key modules that might be most relevant to those of you that have clients that are already retired. Of course, you know your clients better than anyone, and if you can, you're the most qualified to make that decision in terms of which modules, which strategies are the most relevant for these clients and which strategies might provide the most benefit for these clients. So at the end of the day, you can implement those strategies that are the most important to you and to your clients. All right. So before we move on from the retirement analysis here, I do want to make sure just to touch on a couple nuances related to the action items, because the action items really are the sort of crux of all of this here in the retirement analysis. And there's a few pro tips I have for you, especially when it comes to using this in your presentations and maybe pivoting on the fly to answer some unexpected questions. So if a client maybe asks about something that you weren't expecting and you're finding yourself needing to change a specific input that maybe you're not seeing here, maybe we have these clients who are already retired and they're asking you some questions about, healthcare costs. What if our healthcare costs are a little bit higher than we've anticipated? How is that going to affect us? As we see here, we don't see those retirement healthcare costs as a starting point, but you can always click the edit button in the lower right here. And that's going to pull up a checklist of every single input, every single profile card back in the profile. So, if we are looking to update something like healthcare costs, we can find that on our checklist, check that off for one or both clients. And then once I click save, that's going to be added to the action item display. And that's going to allow me to then, make adjustments to those costs and help, answer that client question of what happens if our healthcare costs are a little bit higher than we've planned for. All right. So that being said, the next module that I want to look at here today, and another one of those modules that is a little more, general, a little bit more high level, regardless of your client demographic, is going to be the Snapshot module. This is RightCapital's version of a 1 to 2 page report. This has become incredibly popular as a standalone deliverable, but it can also be incredibly useful as a presentation tool in the RightCapital software. And we're definitely starting to see more and more advisors use this module as the homepage for their client presentations. So just to highlight some of the key features here, this is something that can be fully customized and fully tailored to the individual client household or to the specific presentation that you're preparing to give. You can rearrange the order of these tiles by dragging and dropping them, on this page to, maybe highlight different pieces of information in a more specific order, depending on what you want to touch on first in those meetings. If there's anything that maybe we don't need to see here for a particular client, we can always click the X icon in the upper right of that tile and simply remove that from our snapshot. And of course, there's a couple dozen additional items you can choose from to add to this page as well. So maybe for our retiree client here, that might include something like the client's withdrawal rate. And maybe we want to see what that withdrawal rate is in the first year of our retirement projections. And we can pull that in and take a look at that metric. Maybe we also want to take a look at something like the client's retirement income sources, which is another chart that we have back in the retirement analysis area where clients can see, what income sources are going to help us fund our retirement income need, Social Security, pensions, annuities, savings withdrawals, and more. So we can take a look at all of that information here, by adding those tiles. I do want to also mention when it comes to the snapshot, I said that a lot of advisors have started using this as the homepage in their client presentations. And what I mean by that is, as we hover our mouse over certain tiles, we can actually click the open item button in the upper right to navigate us into that specific module where that piece of information or where that chart is being pulled from. So maybe we did add the withdrawal rate to this snapshot report and we want to take a closer look at that and see, what's the withdrawal rate being generated from? Where is that information coming from? We can click into that open item button and we can see now that's taken us directly to the retirement details area of the retirement analysis. We can see our income sources, that withdrawal rate chart. So we can see what's the withdrawal rate in the first year of our plan and every year going forward. So that can be a great way to, touch on key pieces of information, click into those modules to dive a little bit deeper into what we're covering, and then click back into the snapshot to move on to the next talking point. So in that way, you can really sort of fine tune the narrative that you're wanting to cover in those presentations and walk through things with clients in a very intentional order. All right, so that covers it for the snapshot here. Something I want to make sure I touch on related to the snapshot before we move on here is that you can create templates for this. So while I mentioned that this can be customized, you can tailor this to each and every individual client. If maybe you have a certain set of items in a specific layout that you find yourself using for entire groups of clients or for specific client demographics like retiree clients, you can create templates for these to make it easier for you to easily implement those layouts in advance, prior to that client presentation. So I do want to take a quick look at that. Back here in the advisor portal, you'll notice there is a templates tab at the top of your screen here. This area is where you can find all manner of templates in RightCapital. So we are going to circle back and touch on some of these other template types in just a few minutes here. But I do want to start by taking a look at those snapshot templates. So like I mentioned, you can create templates in advance. This works just like what we looked at in the client plan itself. You can rearrange the order of these tiles, add new items. So you can create these here in your advisor portal. And then you can quickly and easily apply these templates to one or more clients. So maybe we wanted to, apply a certain template to Jane and Michael's plan right before that presentation. That's something we'd be able to do, within this area. So this can definitely save you some time. I have a couple examples here that I always like to show off. This is just, some examples I've created based on some clever things that I've seen successful advisors do with the snapshot template. So I've seen some advisors use the text boxes. You can add text boxes to the snapshot and use those to leave something like a welcome message for clients who maybe have remote access to their plans. You can include some contact info if you want them to be able to get in touch with you. So that can be very valuable. Some advisors make clever use of the notes in other ways. You can match certain pieces of information, certain charts and visuals with more specific notes based around the talking points, the things that you've talked through with the clients in your meetings. So this is just an example of the way that you can match certain pieces of information with some specific talking points and recommendations for that client. So again, just some basic examples for all of you here today, but you can also use templates to create templates that are a little bit more tailored to a specific demographic. So if you did want to create a template for maybe those retiree clients, you can certainly do that. You can call that something like retirees. You can add some of those items that maybe are a little bit more specific to that demographic, and then you can save that and use that going forward within your client plans. All right, so we are at about the halfway point here. For this next portion of the presentation, we're going to highlight a presentation approach that's a little bit different. These last couple modules that we've looked at with the retirement analysis and the snapshot, these are slightly more, fluid and dynamic ways to present to clients. They're meant to be a little bit more fluid depending on, the twists and turns of those conversations that you're having with clients. But of course, there are a lot of advisors who do prefer to set something up in advance, have a little bit more of a tailored, structured approach to your presentations. So the next thing I'm going to walk us through here today is something called client access mode, which is a very popular method for those advisors who want to present to clients in software, but want to have a more streamlined, intentionally ordered approach to the plan as a whole. So first things first, we're going to start off in our clients tab here in the advisor portal. We'll make sure to click, Jane Austen, our sample plan for today. And then we're going to click into the planning access tab on the right-hand side here. So this is where we have the ability to do a couple of things. Mainly, we're able to pick and choose which modules we want to include in that client's presentation. And also we can rearrange the order of these modules as well by dragging and dropping these into a specific order. So this can be really valuable. Let's say maybe we did want to start off by reviewing the blueprint. Maybe we want to check off just the blueprints and we want that to be the very first thing that we cover in our presentation. We can check off that box, drag that to the top here, and that's going to be what we see first. We can also use this to check off some of those modules that are a little bit more specific to, our retiree clients. Maybe we want to take a look at things like the client's allocation path, how their investment allocation might be changing over the course of their plan, over the course of their retirement years. Maybe we want to look at the retirement analysis, maybe that Social Security module for those clients that maybe did retire a little bit early. We can take a look at something like the long-term care insurance analysis for clients who are maybe getting up there in years and are starting to think about those sort of things. Similarly, the estate analysis is something that maybe we could include. So we're going to take a look at both of these modules in just a minute here. But at the end of the day, we can pick and choose what modules we want to see, rearrange the order to reflect the order we'd like to see. And then once we click save to actually view the plan in this layout, instead of opening the plan normally by clicking the open client button, we'll instead click the downward facing arrow here and then click open in client access mode. So what this is going to do is essentially mimic that view that we just dialed in there. So we can right off the bat see that our first module is now the blueprint. So we can use this to jump right into that starting point in our presentation and review that client's current plan. And you'll also notice, there's less modules here than before. Anything that we didn't intentionally choose to include has been hidden for the time being from this perspective. So we don't have to worry about potentially, remembering where different modules are located, what's first, what's next, and where do I find it. We can really, design this to be very specific. So we can walk through things in a very specific order, that high-level view of their plan as a whole, maybe their current balance sheets, the investment module to maybe take a look at, here's how you're invested today. Here's how your investment strategy is going to shift over the course of your retirement years. And we have the retirement analysis included here with, the probability tab and the Social Security tab that we looked at. I do want to take an extra minute or two here to highlight a couple of these modules that we haven't looked at yet related to this retiree case study. So starting with the long-term care insurance analysis, this is something that you might find yourself including for clients that are getting close to, the latter years of their plan and are maybe starting to worry a bit about how long-term care expenses might impact their overall investments, how it might eat into their ending asset value, especially if they have goals in terms of what's going to happen with that money when they pass away. We're going to donate some of that to charity. We're going to leave some of that behind for our kids. We want to make sure that we have enough left to do that, even with long-term care expenses. So this tool can be a great way to analyze the impact that long-term care expenses can have on their invested assets in total, and then B, show clients the benefits that some proposed long-term care coverage can have in terms of maintaining their assets in those later years. So we can see here in this chart, the blue portion of this bar chart shows us, here's the client's invested assets without any long-term care expenses. We can see they're sitting at a little over $5 million by the end of their plan. In purple, we see here's the client's assets with those long-term care expenses. We can see in those last 4 years here, those long-term care costs, do eat into their assets pretty significantly, almost $1 million worth. So the last piece of the puzzle here would be to show clients, what happens if we do propose some additional daily coverage. And, we can, of course, dial in the specifics of that long-term care policy here for each client. But at the end of the day, we'll be able to show clients a little bit more clearly, the impact that that coverage can have in terms of helping to maintain their investments in the latter years of their plan. So that's just a high level overview of, a module that can certainly be valuable for those clients that are maybe a little bit concerned about those long-term care costs. We did already look at tax strategies, but I do want to make sure to spend a little time in the estate module here as well. So for those clients that are maybe in the beginning stages of putting together an estate plan, that's where you might be able to utilize these first two tabs here, the checklist tab and the beneficiary tab. And these are relatively simple tools, but they can still go quite a long way in just, making clients feel comfortable and confident that all of this information is being taken care of, and we can store all of this information somewhere that we won't lose it. We can make sure that all of this is listed within their financial plan, within a living, breathing plan that we can review and update out into the future. So, as I mentioned, relatively simple tools here, but with the estate checklist, we can indicate when certain documents have been created for each client. So maybe once Jane has created a will, we can check that box. That's going to allow us to then specify some details from that document, things like the name of the executor, the name of the guardian, when that document was last updated. And we can do the same thing for each client for all of these different documents and, name all of those important individuals and indicate, when that document was updated last. So it can certainly be very valuable to walk through with the client and potentially to include in a presentation to just review all of that information related to the client's estate plan. Similarly, in the beneficiary tab is where we can list the primary and contingent beneficiaries for all of the different assets and liabilities within the plan. So similarly straightforward here, but we can click into our different accounts. We can choose who's the primary beneficiary. Is it someone in the plan? Is it all children, all grandchildren? Is it a custom beneficiary? Do we want to write, something a little bit more, specific here in terms of maybe someone's inheriting a certain percentage and someone else is inheriting another? We can write whatever we'd like here using the custom option. So lots of flexibility here to categorize all those beneficiaries and all that information. Last but not least, here in the estate module, I always like to touch on the analysis tab as well. This is more similar to something like the retirement module. This is where we can actually see what's happening in terms of the flow of assets past the end of each client's life. So in this plan, we have Jane passing away first. She's a bit older. So we can see, what's the gross value of Jane's taxable estate at the end of her life? What assets make up Jane's estate? Real estate, investments, insurance, and so on. So this can be a sort of interactive way to walk things through with the client and say, here's what your estimated gross taxable estate's looking like. Here's what the estimated taxes and fees are. If you have clients who have a higher net worth and are worried about estate taxes, you'll be able to identify that here. And ultimately, we can see the surviving client inheriting Jane's estate. We can evaluate his taxable gross estate, and then ultimately see how much the client's heirs will be inheriting once they both pass away. So just a way to walk through all those different steps of that client's estate flowchart with them, in addition to those other two modules with the rest of that information. So that was a relatively high level overview of some of these different modules that are a little bit more specific to clients that might already be retired. But I do want to make sure I say before we move on here, if you're looking for any additional information on any of these modules we've touched on after the presentation ends today, definitely don't hesitate to take a look at our help center. We've got training videos and module overviews dedicated to each and every module within RightCapital. So if you are looking for more details on that estate analysis, for example, you'll find a written overview here with all the details for every tab. You'll find a training video walking you through the entire module from beginning to end and all the different features and functions. So lots of great resources here in our Help Center if and when you need them to dive deeper into all these modules we've touched on today. All right, so we are going to dive back into the Help Center in just a few minutes here. I want to mention a couple additional pro tips related to client access mode, this sort of streamlined, ordered viewpoint here within the plan. So I do want to quickly mention, you may have noticed that in the lower right corner of the screen, there is no longer a chat bubble present here. So if you're someone who uses the chat feature to reach out to our support team and ask questions, that's fantastic. But at the same time, maybe you don't necessarily want a response from someone on our support team popping up on your screen in the middle of a client meeting or presentation. So another feature of client access mode is that it does turn off the chat feature temporarily while we're viewing the plan in this way. So that can just be an extra layer to ensure that you don't get interrupted in your presentations by any support chats. Last thing I'll mention related to client access mode, just like the Snapshot module, you do have the ability to create templates for planning access as well. So just like the Snapshot, if you have a specific set of modules, a specific layout that you like to use for a specific client demographic, you can create a new planning access template here, name that whatever you'd like, and then you can make those selections. We can check off the same modules we just looked at, rearrange the order, whatever we'd like to see, and then once we click save, we'll be able to apply those templates to those clients that we're about to present to. So it just saves us the trouble of, having to manually drag and drop those modules, check off those boxes every single time we're about to make a presentation. We can save those templates in advance and save ourselves some time there. All right, so the last thing that we're going to look at here today is reports. And reports, there is actually quite a bit of overlap with planning access in terms of how it works. But, this is sort of the last piece of the puzzle here when it comes to meetings and presentations. While presenting in the software is certainly becoming an increasingly popular way to present these days, there are, of course, many advisors who still want that PDF report either, by itself or as a way to, recap everything that you touched on during those meetings and give the client something to actually walk away with. So when it comes to generating reports in RightCapital, you, of course, have a lot of flexibility in doing so. Let's click back into our client plan here and just walk through the process of generating a report for this client as well. So to generate a report for a client, we would click the gear icon in the upper right and then click into the report subtab here. And as we can see, again, quite a lot of overlap with what we have on screen here with planning access. It's essentially just a checklist of each and every planning module in the client plan. And it works just exactly the same way. We can pick and choose which modules we want to include in that report. We can choose the order that we want those modules to be reflected in the report. So let's go ahead and drag the blueprint to the top again here. Let's maybe include some of those other modules that are a little bit more specific to this case study, maybe the long-term care module as well. And at the end of everything here, once we have our selections dialed in, all we need to do is click download selected pages. That's going to download that report as a PDF file to your computer. And once this downloads here, we can actually open this up and take a look at how all of this information looks in PDF form. So right off the bat here, you may notice on my cover page, it's using that custom logo. There is quite a lot of empty space on my cover page. And the reason for that is, I didn't fill out any of that information in the profile area that we looked at, at the very top of the presentation here today. So that's just another reason to, quickly visit that area in your advisor portal and just make sure that all this information is filled out in terms of, your certifications, your firm name, and all that, information you want to see on those cover pages. Of course, we have all those modules we chose to include in the order that we chose to include them. We're starting things off with our blueprint module here, our net worth, goals, and income, savings, and expenses. We then have the snapshot, so we can see, what that snapshot looks like as, a 1 to 2 page report here. I will mention this can bleed onto a second page if I'd done a better job of rearranging the tiles here, I could have gotten this all on one page. So just something to be aware of there. If you do want to make sure that this is a 1-page report rather than a 1.5-page report, you can be a little strategic with how you arrange these tiles to sort of eliminate empty space here. And then, we have the rest of our modules that we chose to include. We can take a look at the retirement analysis, the probability of success for the proposed and current plans. We can see, all of those modules we chose to include, that long-term care insurance analysis, our tax strategies. And then if we continue to scroll here, we'll find, the estate analysis as well. So that just about covers it, folks. One last thing I want to touch on here today related to reports in particular is, once again, templates. And just like Planning Access and just like the Snapshot, you can create templates for those reports to save yourself the trouble of, having to make those selections each and every time you need to download a report for someone. So, lots of flexibility in terms of how you choose to build these templates out. You can, of course, do that approach we talked about in terms of creating different layouts for different demographics. You can create templates that are a little bit more basic and then maybe a little bit more detailed. Lots of options for you here. Whatever best suits your practice, you can really build these templates out however you like. I do want to mention, when it comes to report templates in particular, something that makes this a little bit more convenient. Unlike the Snapshot and the Planning Access, you don't actually have to click into the Templates tab to create a report template. This is something that can actually be done right within the client plan. So if you're in the process of generating a report for a client and you're realizing, man, I'd love to have this saved as a template so I don't have to do this next time, you can actually, save those templates right here within a client plan as well. So if I click Save Template, you can enter the name of the template here, click Save, and then, going forward, you'll actually find that here to just easily select and make sure that that's, in place before you download that report. So just a quality of life feature to make things a little more convenient for you when saving and implementing report templates. All right, so that does cover it for the content I had prepared for you today. I'm going to pull up the Q&A here and take a look at some of these questions that came in. But as I, pull this up on my screen, I do want to make sure to highlight a couple extra resources that might be useful for you, especially when it comes to preparing for presentations in particular. So once again, I want to take a look at our Help Center really quickly. If I click the chat bubble again and then click Search Our Help Center, I want to make sure to highlight some of our support resources. So you can always find our support resources by clicking Contact Us on the left here and then clicking Support. When it comes to preparing for presentations, I find that this second option here, the ability to schedule a case review, is particularly helpful for advisors. You can always reach out to our team on the phone or using the chat feature, but if you really want to schedule a 15 or 30-minute session with a product expert in advance, this is a great option. You can book these whenever works best for your schedule. You'll have the ability to leave a note for the product expert, letting them know, what questions you have and which client plan you want to look at, so they can, take a look ahead of time and really prepare for that call with you. And then ultimately, you'll be able to hop onto Zoom with that support specialist, walk through that plan with them. They can look over the data entry, give you tips for presenting different aspects of the plan, and just help you feel confident and ready going into those client presentations. And I always like to make sure I mention, for those of you that might be new to RightCapital, there's no cost associated with these case reviews or any of our support resources in general. So, feel free to utilize these as much as you need, especially in the early stages of learning RightCapital. We're always here to help, and we're always here to answer any questions that you might have.